back to my kitchen. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to do a Gumpaste hibiscus flower, and I'm just going to run you through all the tools that you're going to need for this first. To start off with, you're going to need some Florist wire, and I'm using the 22 gauge wires. You need to cut them down so that they are about that length, which is about 12 centimeters. Then you're going to need your cutter. Now I've got a set of cutters here, the teardrop cutters, but I use the second largest cutter for my flowers. So that is the one that I'm going to be using today, the second largest one. Then I've got my bore tools, and I've got my snips and a pair of pliers, and then I've also got some little stamens, and you're going to end up using your stamens on your center piece, which looks something along the lines like that. You can make your petal glue by using a teaspoon of CMC powder to a jar of water. Stir it well, or give it a good shake, leave it in the fridge overnight to thicken up. So you can make your own. Then I'm also going to be using the Blossoms flower paste. I like to use the white when I'm making my flowers, and then I can dust them to whatever color I want. You also need your petal pad, which is here, and I have got my veiner for the flower petals, and I have some Florist tape and a pair of scissors, and then I have my dusting powders, and I'm going to be using my orange and my yellow dusting powders. And I like to work in a container that when I'm dusting my flowers, the dust doesn't fly everywhere. So you can use something along these lines, and because it's polystyrene, I like to wash them and reuse them so that these are reusable. Then I've also got a fruit tray, and you're going to see how I'm going to place my petals in here, and you need to let them dry overnight before you can actually wire them together. So let's start. Right, I'm going to start off with a stamen, and I've got my Blossoms paste. You do not need to add CMC to your Blossoms paste. It is ready to use, and it's perfect for your flowers. So I'm first going to roll this out into a sausage, and you want it fairly thin. So I'm just going to break a piece off. So you want to roll out your sausage nice and smooth, so you can use a cake smoother for that. And you want it to be about 3/4 of the size of the petal you're using. So I'm going to just make a little mark there, and then I'm going to cut it. I'm going to take my wire, and with my pliers I'm going to just hook the end of that wire. Okay, and then I'm just going to flatten it. And then dip that into a little bit of petal glue and insert it into the center of that sausage that you've rolled. Push it all the way. I want to go about 3/4 of the way up. Just roll it nice and even. And then the bottom of it, you want to just pinch around the edge, just so that it fits nicely onto your wire. Make sure it's nice and straight. Just make sure when it's finished that it's nicely rolled out. There we go. Now we're going to add the stamens to the centerpiece, and it's going to end up looking like that. So for the stamens, we need to cut them fairly short. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take each one, just dip the tip of it into the petal glue and insert it into your sugar. There we go, into the sugar paste. And that now needs to dry overnight. You just place it on a polystyrene just to set, and once that's dry you can continue working with it. And I'm going to roll out the paste for the petals. We start off in a ball and make sure you've got no cracks in there, and then you can start rolling it out. Now when I roll out the paste, I'm going to push down in the center and I'm going to roll it to the sides. So you've got a fat piece on either side, and then you're going to roll that a little bit more and roll that a little bit more, and keep going until you've got a nice thinner middle. So this piece in the middle needs to be fairly thin, and your outer edges need to be on the thicker side. Just going to roll that again. As I get towards the edge, I lift the pressure on my rolling pin so that I'm not going to flatten that edge too much. And the reason for that is so that when you cut your flower, that you have a section where your wire is going to go through and it's not going to poke through the petal. You want a thicker piece for the veins. Right, so I'm going to cut that out. And for your hibiscus flower, you need 5 petals, but it's always a good thing to have a couple of extra. I usually do 2 extra petals per flower, because sometimes when you're winding them together, once they've dried, you may have a breakage, or one petal might not be quite the right shape. It's always a good idea to have extra. So I can get 4 out of this lot. Just make sure that all your rough edges are smoothed down. You can just do that by rubbing your finger around the edge. Okay, I'm going to take my wire, pop it into the petal glue, wipe off the excess, and then I'm going to take my petal and I'm going to insert that, and it's going to go between my finger and my thumb, and I'm guiding that wire as I'm pushing it up with those 2 fingers. You can see there. I'm only going to push it up about just on halfway. Then I take my veiner, and you can see this section here is quite deep. So that's where my wire is going to be placed. And I'm going to pop that in there. And I'm going to put the top part of the veiner on. And I'm going to press around the edge and just sort of halfway on that petal. I'm not going to push all the way down where that wire is. And then when I lift it up, then I have a flower petal that's beautifully veined. Now I'm going to take my bore tool, and just to the outer edges, just smooth that piece down there, just to the outer edges of that petal, I'm going to have the bore tool half on the pad and half on the petal, and I'm just going to carefully smooth that area around there, just thinning that edge and just giving it a little bit of ruffles to the sides. I'm going to take my smaller bore tool, if it tears, you can just push it back into place and just go over it with your bore tool slightly. Now that petal has to be put in a position to dry like that. And the way I do it is I use the fruit trays. I pop it into the fruit tray so that the front side of the petal faces downwards and the underneath of the petal is facing upwards, and you want it to have a nice curve so that when you place your flowers together, you can see that lovely curve that comes in there. So if you can imagine that petal is lying in that tray, when it comes out, that's how it's going to be. Take your wire into the petal glue and insert it into the petal, place it in the veiner and push. And then just go around the edge with your bore tools. And again, you're going to place that into the fruit tray to dry. And you're going to continue that with at least 6 to 7 petals. Remember to make extra. You actually only need 5 for the flower, but you're going to need at least 2 extra in case something goes wrong with the other petals. And you need to leave them to dry at least 24 hours so that your petal is nice and firm, so that when you wire them together with your florist tape, that they're not going to break. You want them to be set perfectly. And you're also going to dust them, and you can only dust them once they dry. Next step, we're going to dust the petals and the stamen, and I have got my orange and my yellow powders here. And I'm going to start off with the orange. So you take a little bit of orange, just dab it down so you don't put all of that orange onto your petal or your stamen, and you start with your dust. And you can see by working in this container that I've got here, it's actually keeping all the dust together, so you're not getting it all over your workstation. I'm going to go up there, and then I'm going to take my other brush for the yellow. And I'm going to work on this side with the yellow. Again, I'm just dusting this area here. Okay. And then just with a little bit of the orange, I'm just going to touch the tips of those stamens. Okay, so that's the one part done. Okay, now that the petals are nice and dry, we're going to start dusting the petals, and I like to dust both sides of my petals, because if you've got a flower on a cake, you want to make sure that they can see all the flower, and if people go to the other side of the cake, if it's not dusted, they're going to see white petals. And that's why I like to dust both sides. So I'm going to start off again with the orange, and I'm going to work from the bottom. And this is the underside of my petal. I'm going to go to the front side, the one that's going to be on display. And I'm just going to dust that. And then I'm going to take my yellow, and we're going to dust the rest of that yellow. You can see you've got one petal ready. That's why I like to start off with a white petal, because when you dust it, it changes the look drastically. From a white petal to a beautifully colored petal. And I'm going to continue doing the others, and then I'm going to put it together for you just now. That's all the petals dusted, and now I'm going to wind them together with the florist tape. With your florist tape, going to cut pieces about 18 centimeters long, and you need to have about 6 of those. And with your florist tape, the way to activate it is you just gently pull it, and that will activate the stickiness on the other side of it, so that when you're winding it around your wire, it sticks to the wire. So we first start off with the stamen that we made earlier, and we're going to have one of our petals, and you want to bend your petals just slightly. So I'm holding it with my wire, and I'm just bending that wire very slightly, so that when it comes up to the stamen, it tilts back just a little bit. You're going to take your florist tape, and you're going to attach it to the wires and start winding it around. Remember to pull it so that it's sticky. And you're going to start winding that around the top, and as soon as it's secure, just pull your wires down gently so that they don't leave a gap at the top. And I'm going to wind that all the way down so that those 2 wires are nice and secure. And as I get to the bottom, just snip that piece there and just tuck it in. Then I take my next petal, take your pliers, hold it with your pliers and just gently bend that wire back slightly. And you're going to pop it next to that one. Just so there's a tiny little overlap. Take your Florist tape, pull it, and then wind that around the wires. Make sure it's nice and secure. Then you're going to take another petal, bend it slightly, put that one next to that petal, slight overlap, and wind those together. Just gently pull those wires just so that those petals come down a bit further. All the way down. I'm going to put on your remaining two. There you go. Bend that slightly. Take your Florist tape, stretch it, and wind that on. And then you take your last one and bend it and place that last one there. Just gently move those petals slightly so that it all fits in, and you want to secure that with your tape. Pull it down and wind your tape around. And then I'm going to go back to the top. I'm going to take a piece of Florist tape there and just wind those top, just at the top there where those wires are sticking out. I'm just going to wind that just to neaten it off. Wind your tape around there and go all the way to the bottom. Make sure your petals are placed nicely, and there you have your hibiscus flower. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'd love you to join me for my next one, which is also going to be a flower, and you're going to be making an Inca lily next time. So till then, goodbye.